Three games instantly jump to my mind as modern classics. We have Catan, Ticket to Ride and Pandemic. All of these three games opened up the wonders of board gaming to such a wide audience. Now I think reasons for this are ease of play, a theme that is quite approachable to a wider audience, and also these games have lots of expansions and offshoots to grow their brand. Now I'm talking about a game today called Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Now Star Wars: The Clone Wars uses the Pandemic system. So if you've played Pandemic previously, you pretty much know 80% of the core mechanics in this game already, and that's a good thing. But the difference with this game is we now have an IP that is loved by millions and millions of people around the world, and that is Star Wars. In Star Wars Clone Wars, you are banding together as Jedi generals taking on the Separatist droid forces. So firstly, let's see how the game plays, then I'm going to give you my final thoughts on this game. In this game, the Jedis will be working cooperatively to defeat the droids, the blockades and the villain, while also completing missions before the threat level drops to 7 and you lose. You're going to be aided by squad cards, you're going to be rolling die, you're going to be doing a whole bunch of things, and then right at the end, you have a big boss battle, big finale with the villain, and that is the basis of Star Wars. To start off, we need to pick the villain that we're playing with and the Jedis. We have 4 different villains to choose from, all with varying difficulty, and all of the Jedis have their own special abilities as well. From here, a lot of this gameplay is going to be similar to Pandemic. We're going to start off with the invasion cards, the invasion planets, and we're going to be adding droids to start our world, and it's going to be very similar to the way Pandemic grows their virus out. From there, we're going to be choosing the amount of missions we're going to play in this game. The less missions, the easier it is, the more missions, the harder it is. Now the good guys always go first and the Jedis are up. You have 4 action points to use and 4 different things you can do. First thing is flying between planets. Each one of those planets you fly between is going to be 1 action. Next up, you can reinforce with more squad cards into your hand. Every squad card you pull in is also going to be 1 action. Next up, we can attack those pesky little droids, those blockades, the villains. Each time we attack on a planet, that will be 1 action point. And then finally, we can complete a mission. That will also be 1 action point each time we attempt that mission. So remember, you have 4 action points to use and you can do any of those 4 things multiple times. Let's look at those squad cards in a little bit more detail. Firstly, Assault and Stealth. Both of these 2 types of cards will help you increase your attack levels when you're attacking the Separatists. Next up, the Armor cards. That's going to help you defend attacks coming in towards you. Transport cards. This will double your movement when you fly. And then lastly, Ally cards. These are going to give you one-time effects that are going to be great effects that you can use throughout the course of the game. And finally for the Jedis, let's find out how does the attack system work. It's pretty simple. Roll that dice. It's going to have attack symbols on there and it's also going to have damage symbols on there. You can add to those attack symbols with some of your cards. Remember that Assault and Stealth cards, and you can also defend and damage with those Armor cards. The Jedis have struck first, but it's time for the villain to strike back. The way they're going to do that is through their 6 card personal deck. Flip over the top villain card there and resolve its effects from top to bottom. But one of those 6 cards will be a Planet Under Siege card, and this is not a good thing. This is the equivalent of having a pandemic. So after the villain has taken their turn, it's now time to do the invasion planets. So what we're going to do is we're going to have an invasion level. We will flip over invasion planets to that number and then put a droid on each of those planets. This is where things get dicey. If the droids were ever to number 4, instead of putting out the 4th droid, we would put out a blockade, and this equals an occupation. An occupation basically means we're going to be raising that threat level. Remembering, if we ever get that threat level to 7, it is game over and a Separatist win. Now let's summarize all of this together. As Jedis, you have 4 actions for your turn. You can choose to fly around the planets, get in more squad cards, you can attack those droids, those villains and the blockades, and finally you can complete some missions. After that player has taken their turn, the villain turns over one of their cards and you resolve those effects. And then finally, you flip over the amount of invasion planet cards as the invasion level says, and then that is the end of 1 turn. Then the next player will take on their 4 actions and so forth. So if at the end of the game you've managed to contain those droids and you've been the villains and you've completed those missions, you've done all of the good stuff, you'd think you've won, but there's one last hurrah. What's going to happen is once you've completed that final mission, you've got to do the finale, the big boss battle. Flip over the villain card and complete that boss level fight, and you have completed Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So what do I think of this game? Well, firstly, I love the theme. The theme of Star Wars using the pandemic system was absolutely brilliant. Now, the Star Wars enthusiasts will probably pick holes in this plot, but for me, I loved it. I loved the fact that the droids were growing out on all of these planets. I was trying to keep them under control. I was trying to get around and fight the villains. I was trying to complete the missions. While we're working together, the Jedi is working cooperatively to try and tackle all this together. The pandemic system worked well, and the theme of Star Wars in this system is brilliant. Art and components, and I'm not let down here either. Being a licensed Star Wars product, the art is familiar. There's lots of artifacts from the movie and a lot of things that the true Star Wars lover will appreciate. The board, black background, a whole bunch of planets, but what that does is really highlights the components. First things first, the die, that big chunky die rolling across the table there, so much satisfaction. But it's really those minis. Those minis are going to pop on that game board. There's a whole bunch of different sculpts, even going down to the little droids which have different sculpts for those droids. I really appreciate all this effort for a retail game. Replayability. And this is going to be similar to a standard game of Pandemic, but I think just that little bit better. The main difference is going to be with those villains. Those villains are all going to have their own deck of cards which will play slightly different, plus also each will have their own separate finale. On top of that, you can also tailor the amount of missions so you can tailor it to an easier game or a harder game. All of this is going to add to a lot of replayability. The one thing I just didn't like was the solo. The solo is literally telling you to play two-handed solo, and I reckon they could put in so much more effort and come up with a proper solo system. So overall, what do I think of this game? I think this is a great addition to the Pandemic line of games. That pandemic system is so brilliant. The way that tension is always rising, it's so good. And then you add in that Star Wars IP right over the top of it, it is just brilliant. Also, for a family board game night, I love the fact playing a cooperative game, working as a team, and this Star Wars game is perfect for that. So does this game replace Pandemic? Probably not, but it's a difference. It's something, if you really love Star Wars, then you will love this game because that pandemic system is top notch. So there you go. That's what I think of this game. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this game? And what is your favorite Star Wars character across all of the episodes? So lastly, Baby Yoda would appreciate you subscribing to my channel. And that's it from me. Look, I'm Hoax. This is Board Game Bangers. Till next time, laters.